what drew you to this project? Obviously, it did get some attention early, but why said this is what we need to do and we want to get deeper in this?
So when HBO first approached us, for us, what was really compelling, more my co-director and myself, I mean, we really didn't want it to be about this crazy family. Like, we didn't want it to be just another story about an alleged killer or an alleged criminal, but really bring to the audience something that is a bit more thought-provoking. And the minute we started digging into Hampton and seeing this whole inherited wealth, inherited privilege, that really drew us in, because it's not a story only of Hampton, South Carolina. It's a story of many small towns that have this prominent figure that can basically do whatever he wants. And I think that has to talk to many of us.
And you really got into that by starting with some of the people in town who, you ran into, I know, a lot of trouble finding people to talk. So finally, how did you end up with the people that you did and what they had to offer, do you think?
So for us, it was really important not to make it into a true crime that is a profile of a perpetrator. You see so many of them out there, Dahmer, for example, that really, showcases the perpetrator. And for us, the real heroes of the story are the victims and the people who have been suffering for many years. And again, if we had more time, we have so much more cases that have never been discussed in the media. And I think also, us as the media, we are also at fault at some level, because we found the case interesting because of the Murdaughs. You didn't have a show about that when Stephen Smith was allegedly murdered 6-7 years ago. I think that's when people from all over the nation should have come to South Carolina and start investigating. But people are drawn to money and power, and so are we.
I think that's what's so interesting is that throughout, whether it was Alec or Paul, you didn't make judgments. In fact, in this, you almost gave them that chance to say, Anthony said it best, said he still loves Paul despite what went on. I think that was one of the most powerful moments, at least in the first piece, of Anthony being willing to see that these were friends and these were people who truly cared about each other, not just people who were upset about what happened.
I think watching a lot of news clips from the boat crash, something there was a bit cringy. Something there was a bit painful, seeing how Paul was completely demonized by the media, and they made him into this crazy, insane perpetrator. And in the end of the day, he was a pretty young man that lost his life. And I think also it's important to remember that although, yes, he was drunk, and it seems, if you follow the evidence, that he was completely at fault, because of the boat crash, it didn't seem like he was someone that was happy about it. He didn't want to crash into a bridge, and he definitely didn't want his friends to lose their life. And I think it's important to remember, because, it's very easy to jump to judgment and write trash on Facebook. But in the end of the day, it is a young man who lost his life, and he is not here in order to defend himself. So alongside the very serious allegations against him, it's important to remember that he was more than just this boy that was in this boat crash. He was a whole human being, and he was very brutally murdered.
The Stephen Smith case then, too, as episode 2 continues on, you really got deeper into that and sort of the conspiracy, but also the power that the family had to potentially stay away from not just prosecution, but police in general. I found that really interesting, how much you delved into that and what more we learned about that side of things.
Stephen Smith, for me, it really affected me personally. And I think it's really such a horrific case because unlike any other victim as it is involved in this terrible history, Sandy Smith and obviously Stephanie, they don't know what happened to their son and to their brother, and they didn't get any answers. And until this day, all they have is suspicions, but no closure. And I really hope that now people will really rally and create some kind of movement telling police officials or the DA, the solicitor, we need to investigate this, not because we are looking for any specific people that are guilty, but because the family needs answers. They need some kind of closure. And it's horrific just to know that, your son was out with his car one night, and that's the last thing anybody knows about him. And like, as a parent, I can't even imagine that kind of tragedy. And I really hope the series will push someone to come and speak out, because people know what happened. It was not just, I believe, it was not just a innocent bypasser in the night that was involved, but people know.
Did you get a sense from all the people you spoke to that they wanted to talk, that they wanted to say something? Because we've not heard from some of the people that you spoke to in this documentary.
I think as time goes by, the control that the Murdaugh family had over Hampton and the whole county is starting to weaken. I think people are becoming less and less afraid. And I truly hope people are going to start speaking out more and more. Obviously, our contributors were extremely brave. They took very big risks because until now, the Murdaughs could just allegedly wipe you off the map politically or financially if you speak against them. And you know this as a journalist yourself in the area, what their grasp is and how controlling they were and how much people were avoiding speaking out against them. And I hope, people now can really start talking.
Yeah, that's incredibly interesting how much they want seemingly are out there now where they weren't before. With with Maggie and Paul's Murdaugh's murders, you took a lot of painstaking time to make sure it wasn't just an indictment of Alec himself, but instead to give all sides of this issue and the possibility that he did not do this.
Yes, for us, our job as documentary filmmakers is to bring the facts. We are definitely not a jury. We are not judges of the situation. And I think, now that documentaries are moving into this very entertainment kind of sphere, it's important to remember that we are journalists and it's not our responsibility or privilege to judge anyone. I think the audience needs to make up their minds, but also the audience need to understand that we don't have yet all the facts at hand, and we can only ask very troubling questions. A lot of what Alex said throughout the years does not compute. It doesn't really align. They're very harsh questions that we should all ask. But between that and jumping to a 100% ironclad conclusion that he's a murderer, I think that's what we have the court system for. And we do need to give the lawyers and the prosecutors enough time both to defend and debunk all these evidence.
Because you were able to talk to Jim Griffin, I'm assuming you reached out to the Murdaugh family who chose not to speak for this.
Yes, sadly, none of the Murdaughs wanted to participate in the show, despite several attempts to get any kind of reaction from them. And I mean, Jim was very forthcoming, but obviously, you know, he is Alex's lawyer, and the facts that he presents are facts that have to do good for his client. I mean, it's not just talking to someone off the street.
Anything surprise you while you were going through the footage and creating all three parts?
Wow, so much. I mean, it's first of all, it's just unbelievable the control this family had. It's just unbelievable that they had such control over the police and the judicial system and the county and obviously the town, and things that seem to me that should be absolutely illegal are just happening there on a daily basis, like having lavish events held for police officers while you are both the prosecutor and the defense lawyer in the county. And I think really it's such a small pond that it has to be much more monetized, and people need to look into it, because the whole ties between money and power lead to this horrible corruption. And in the end of the day, it leads to people that feel that they can do anything, that they are above the law.
You're going to be a journalist, and I know you may not answer this, but I'm still going to ask it anyways because I have to. So you've done immense amount of research, more than a year about this. You've gone through all these things. You've done everything else. Do you believe that Alex Murdaugh killed his wife and son?
I have absolutely no idea. I mean, as a human being, I want to believe he did it. I mean, I can't imagine someone killing his wife and son out of money interests. Like, I think also it's so rare. Like, it's not someone that was caught red-handed and he's absolutely psychotic. It seems that it was really planned out, but it was not something that came from this moment of rage. So, I mean, as a father, as a husband, I want to believe human beings are not able to do that kind of thing. But looking at the evidence, there are a lot of evidence that raise really troubling questions. But I have absolutely no idea what happened. And you know that, I mean, for the past year, we've been searching for answers, not only for the show, but just to quiet our brain, you know, running around. And like after every single interview, like the whole team would discuss it again and again and again, and just ask how, why, and like for what reason would someone do such a hideous crime? What I can say that is extremely troubling, as I see it, is throughout the year, what I didn't understand is if someone was, you know, cutting off the Murdaughs, if someone was targeting them, if there is this insane killer or killers going around, how come Alex didn't talk to his son Buster and tell him like, hey, you need to keep like a very low profile, maybe get out of the state, out of the country. Someone is trying to kill us. And that whole, you know, feeling of urgency of like, we are under attack, I never saw that. It seems like everybody's extremely calm. And that just didn't compute in my brain. Like, I don't understand if someone did such a hideous crime to the family, why aren't they more terrified? But obviously, between that and jumping to any kind of conclusion is like a whole sea of evidence. And I mean, I am, you know, waiting for answers like all of us.
Yeah, because you started with one case and then had to twist and turn every time you looked because you thought you had one thing and then something else would pop up during your time as you were filming everything too. You had to go, now we have to include this person or we have to include this situation too. I know it everything twisted on you several times.
Yes, and also there are so many cases that have not been discussed yet. I mean, the Nice case, which is a terrible crime, and because it was so long ago and there is no physical evidence going around, like we couldn't tell that story on a legal matter, but I would love journalists to look into it. And even before that, you had the Yeoman's case. And I think there's a lot more cases that are going to pop up throughout the years. And I hope all of these victims can get to some kind of closure.
If you had anything to say to the audience about what they should take away from this docuseries, what would you tell them?
I think the most important thing to look at is Alex Murdaugh and his family were not operating alone. It was not a psycho killer hidden in his basement that decided to do evil. It's a system of corruption that's been going around for years and years and decades and is still imminent, not only in South Carolina, but all over the place. And I really want people not to look at it as, oh, it's so sexy looking at this murderer, but question our system that creates this privilege. And the privilege is dangerous, and changing the system is going to be very painful because, for example, the police officers and the court officials that Alex was involved in and the banks, like nothing has changed there. It's still the same police officers, the same, lawyers, prosecutors, judges, the same banks. You took out, one pin from this stack, but I think there's a lot to do in order to clean up the system.